So for the month of July, our global organization picked the exploration of loving kindness and forgiveness. I think you guys know all of that, so thank you so much, and have a great weekend. Loving kindness and forgiveness and the actual action that is required of us with regards to those modalities, those practices. Kindness, forgiveness. They say we see a worldwide culture in which forgiveness, whether for errors, injustice, or debts, is the norm. Forgiveness is the norm. And that is the thing by which we get to strive and adopt and never stop reaching for with regards to the personalization of that, where forgiveness is the norm. So I had a dream this week, and if you're like me, you probably dream a lot, and then you wake up the following morning and go, gosh, that was amazing. What was that again? And so you hadn't written it down. This week was different. I'm going to purposefully use the word prophetic. I had a prophetic dream that really jolted me and stuck with me. I was observing in this dream this enormous glass vase, just enormous, like it would be the vase that a giant would have on his table. And there was this big vase. To the side of the glass vase was a guardian, sort of a non-gendered guardian just standing there. And inside this glass vase, coiled within it, was an enormous snake. And if you can sort of imagine what it would look like if a spaghetti noodle was pressed up against the glass, that was the way it looked like. The skin was pressed up against that glass, so I couldn't really determine what kind of snake that it was, but it was off in the distance. And I was standing observing. And in a lightning flash, just as quick as you can imagine, a blink of an eye, the serpent came out of the glass, and it was a viper. And it went and it attacked me and it bit me in the solar plexus. And you would think that that would wake me up. No, there was more. And so as I stood there for just a momentary second from the shock of that and having realized that I had been punctured by its fangs, I didn't fall backwards, I fell forwards, almost into a submission pose on all fours. And I could begin to feel the venom filling the cavity of my body. And as I looked up at this guardian for help, assistance, it did nothing. It just stood there and observed. And I realized in that moment that this was it. This was the finality of me, that at any given moment, my respiratory system would end, and that which had been the venom would take over my life. And then I woke up. And it hung with me for several days, and then every Friday I meet with Dr. Will Coleman. He's my buddy, and it used to be sort of a student-teacher relationship, and now it's become like a mastermind thing that we do. And I said, I know you've told me before that you're not really that into dream interpretation. And I said, but I have one for you. And so I told him of the glass vase and the serpent reaching out and biting me in the solar plexus. And he goes, oh, I can interpret that one. I said, I'm all ears. And he said, in Hebrew, the word for serpent is nahash. And nahash means oracle or messenger. And when that messenger then bites into the solar plexus, which is the part of the lower brain indicating that which is your intuitive nature, and it bites you and it injects this poison, he said to me, the bite that kills is the bite that heals. The bite that kills is the bite that heals. And I looked at him. And I said, what you talking about, Willis? He said, the poison is the medicine. So often we talk about polarity, right? That nothing is really black or white or either or, that it's all congruent. That when we talk about, and this is what we will talk about today, the relationship that we have with fear or love, they're both connected. They're just on opposite ends of the pole. They're the choice by which we respond or react to the world of effect. I either respond from a place of fear or I respond from a place of love. But it is a feeling that is related within me. And so I can either go which pole I'm going to go to. So the bite that kills is the bite that heals. And we began to discuss the fact that all of us, when we want this sort of healing or redemption or relief in our life, a lot of times what we try to circumvent is the very thing that brought us to our knees in submission in the first place. We just want it fixed, rather than honoring the thing that brought us down to our knees, rather than honoring all of the fears that sidelined us, that paralyzed us enough repetitively to the point where we got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it was in that divine moment, much of how any person in the program describes that bottoming out. It's that in that moment, there is the beauty, the unparalleled beauty of surrender. And until we actually get to that place of pure intent of surrender, then we never fully begin to migrate towards the path of love. Because we still have one foot invested in the story. As Ifesinichi said so beautifully, that story or that blockage or that fear, because we haven't what? We haven't bottomed out yet. We haven't surrendered. So it's still part of that thing we drag around as a little bit of our identity. The bite that kills is the bite that heals, meaning here is this oracle or this message that's biting me where? In my intuition. And in biting me in that realm of my intuition, it's telling me that I must die to everything that stands in the way of my intuitive nature. Because you see, anything within the realm of the intellect or that wants to analyze out of my intuition is the thing that's associated with fear. Everything that's associated with my intuitive nature is the thing that corresponds to love. This is about a migration from fear to love. You and I and everyone have within us a guidance system, which is a guidance system encased in love. When it is encouraging us to move forward, to do things, to die to something old so that something new can be born, it's not doing that to torment us or to generate more fear. It's doing that to move us to greater, infinite expressions of love. But I will never understand or appreciate that migration to love if I don't first fall in submission to the fear and let it die within me. And so much of it is about spiritual bypass. I want to bypass all of the ugly and I just want to get to the good stuff. When there is conversation to be had in the ugly, there is conversation to be had in the messy. There is conversation to be had with the fear to understand, why am I so attached to this illusional thinking? In what way has this served me? And in what way have I finally bottomed out so that I can relinquish that, so that I can authentically begin to move into that place of love? So that snake, that oracle, is imparting into my lower brain to expand my intuition. So I'm always fascinated about what it is associated under the label of fear that we continue to perpetuate in. Every moment, we are encountering the opportunity to decide between I'm going to go in the direction of fear or I'm going to go in the direction of love. Every single moment. In fact, Paulo Coelho, the Brazilian writer, said, our whole life is the decision between going towards fear or love. Every single moment. And so when we become more practiced in the direction of love, then we can begin to see the things where, or see the habits whereby we have been feeding the fear. One of those things that amazes me is this idea of analyzing. Do you ever analyze things to death? To death. Well, let's sit here and pick this apart and find out why it doesn't work. And they call that the analysis of paralysis. With heavy analysis comes paralysis. I'm not saying not look at those things, but you understand that when we look at those things, we look at them from a different lens, a different perception. We don't climb back into the ditch to understand the ditch. We can look at the ditch and go, aha, that was a ditch. I don't need to go back there and analyze the ditch and take soil samples. It was a ditch. And then I get to understand that I don't have to return to that. But if I have to analyze the ditch, if I have to create business cards about having once lived in the ditch, if I create a platform of speaking that identifies myself with the ditch, then I am analyzing that particular component on my lifeline to death. And so in the analysis that leads to paralysis, it's one of the most deadliest things that halts our progress, whether individually, whether collectively, whether as a community, whether as an organization, whether as a business. Think about that. Think about the businesses that you are involved in and how heavy it is sometimes on analysis. And those of us who try to migrate away from that are called reckless, rather than honoring the intuitive path within us that says, I know this doesn't make any sense, and this is what I'm called to do. And so when we overlies to the point of depletion, then we're not really good to uphold the vision. Do something first, and then talk about it afterwards. Don't talk about it and then go do it. Do something first. I know I'm probably going to be the only person that ever tells you to do it that way. So you can throw that out if that doesn't work for you. But I am finding that by honoring the intuitive nature, our migration towards love expands exponentially. And we move ourselves then into the beauty. One of the things that I realize is that the world, this world that we live in and inhabit, is made for people who conform their reality to their vision. I'm going to conform all of that reality out there to my vision. I'm not going to conform to its vision for me. And so that is the dying. That is the dying to the self-doubt. That is the dying and surrendering to being so concerned and heavily involved in what other people think. The world is made for people who conform reality to their vision. So it's time for you and I and all of us to bring our vision into present reality. It isn't about waiting for somebody else to do it. So in that fear, there is always then that fear of failure. What will other people think? But I think it is important for you to consider that there can be a redefinition to this idea or this label of failure. Do you ever hear of Greek mythology, Icarus? Do you know what Icarus was? Icarus wanted to go towards the sun. He wanted to fly towards the sun. So he crafted some wings. And he put those wings together with wax. And so that mythology tells us that as Icarus was flying towards the sun, the wax melted. And he is associated then with failure. And I would like for you to redefine that this morning. Because how many of you understand that Icarus actually flew? So Reverend Susan Zoller posted the most amazing poem by a poet by the name of Jack Gilbert. She posted it on her Facebook page, and it was stunning, because the first line of his poem says, "Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew." And towards the end of the poem, he says, "I believe Icarus was not failing as he fell, but just coming to the end of his triumph." And if we could begin to reposition ourselves or redefine that, then we could begin to look at that fear and not be so bound by it. There was this guy, maybe you've heard of him, his name was John Lennon. He said there are two basic motivating forces in the world, fear and love. And so when we are afraid, we do what? We pull back from life automatically. You automatically put resistance up. When you're afraid, you pull back from life. When we are in love, we open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first in all of our glory and in all of our imperfections. And if we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. And I know that you've heard that before, that it's nearly impossible to try to go and fill another person's cup when your cup is depleted. We've talked so often about the necessity for self-love, and how the way in which we impart love into the world is unilaterally equal to the way in which we love ourselves. So sometimes we, myself included, have given a message that says, you need to love yourself first. And then my friend Edward Viljoen gave me a different take on that this week. My friend Edward Viljoen is the minister at CSL in Santa Rosa, California. And every week he calls me and he says, "Oh man, I quoted you this week," which makes me go listen to his talk to realize that he didn't quote me, but he just keeps telling me that. And I fall for it every single time. I'm like, what'd he say? What pearls of wisdom did he say? It's his little way of joking with me. But what he said in one of his talks in the month of June was remarkable. And he said, yes, of course we need to practice self-love. However, have you forgotten that your parents were not the best at loving themselves? And yet they were put into a position to do what? To love you. And if they had adopted this doctrine and said, "I'm sorry, I can't be in touch with you right now, I got to go find myself," then as infants and adolescents, we'd be left going, where are they? So in other words, it's not an either-or thing. I'm still going to need to love those who are in my circle of influence to the best of my ability, and, not but, and in the process of doing that, I must, with feverish enthusiasm and commitment, find the way in which to love myself and to not let up and to not use other people as the excuse for that. And so it becomes this sort of dance that we do with the world, that as I love myself, I learn to love you better. As you love yourself in greater degrees and capacities, your love then expressed into the world becomes richer and more authentic and not codependent. But it becomes that which has greater degrees of unconditionality. We must begin to tell new stories about ourselves. We must learn to tell something different that isn't so self-identified with our fear, but that is more identified with that which is our passion and that which we love. Again, you always have to listen to these messages and the dichotomy and the paradox of them, because what we're saying is you can not acknowledge the fear, but you can't stay there. You and I must begin to die to that. So that which is your intuitive nature that is telling you, beckoning you every single day to move into a greater degree of love. That is where we begin to move and migrate and give most of our time and attention to. And so that means that at some point I must stop telling the story about what went wrong. Tell it as long as you need to tell it. But understand, it's going to start stinking after a while. It has a shelf life. In fact, maybe you're the one that gets to determine what the expiration date of that story will be. But understand there must be an expiration date so that you can begin to self-identify with that which is wanting to be reborn from the oracle or the messenger of the serpent that is saying you must rise up now to the greater capacity of that which is you as love. Of that which is you as love. And so I think about some of the giants within history who went through so much. And I know at some point they stopped telling the story about what happened to them. At some point, Nelson Mandela did not get up and keep talking about his life in jail. At some point, he began to tell the story about liberation and freedom for his people. At some point, you and I must stop talking about our metaphoric jails. And we must talk about the liberation and the freedom of who and what we are. Because that is what your intuitive nature is calling to you. The other part is wanting to die. Can you imagine? Our founder, Ernest Holmes, said, can you imagine if in your committed practice, every single day, for 1 year, you focused on that which is the generating fire of love that is inside of you. For 1 year. That you focused on what is working. For 1 year, you praised the components of your life in every facet of the pie and understood that life, that which is the universe, has your back. For 1 year, if you stayed devoted to that singular practice, that at the end of that 1 year, you would not recognize yourself. You, just like the serpent or the snake, would have shed a skin that no longer has anything whatsoever to do with the soul of you. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, wrote in this little remarkable book called It's Up to You. He said, we must not be disturbed by the contradiction of objective experience, that which is out there. We shall have to know that the truth that we announce is superior to the condition which it is to change. You understand that? When I announce love in all of its capacity, in its energy, its vibration, its truth, when I announce love, fear doesn't stand a chance, because that which is love will absorb and evaporate that. We shall have to know that this truth, when announced, is superior to the condition which it is to change. We shall have to see that God in us recognizes God in the other person until the God in the other person recognizes the God in us. He just got his namaste on. This cannot be done by human will. You understand human will, which is equated to willpower. At some point, we have to realize that willpower in and of its own, trying to fix or force things in the realm of effect, has only as lasting effect as the Wheaties that I ate. And once the Wheaties that I ate runs out, I run out of steam. But the will, that is the mental will, that is the creative mind, knows nothing of depletion. It does not rely on willpower. It relies on the realignment of that which is love. So you think you're tired, you think you're worn out, you think you're done, you think you're depleted. If you want a remedy for that, start loving. Start loving. Start loving the things that you profess to hate. Start loving the parts of you that you have condemned. Start loving the entirety of your past. Start loving all of that. And I guarantee you, that which is love, which knows no depletion, will begin to recalibrate all of that within this particular physical system and bring us back into the alignment of truth and give us a definitive demarcation that we have truly migrated from fear to love. And so it is.
Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.